The stench hits you first. Rotting flesh mixed with human waste and the acrid smoke of burning bodies. You're standing in the doorway of what was once a thriving bakery in London. 3048, but now serves as a makeshift plague house. 3 bodies lie stacked like cordwood in the corner, their skin blackened with the telltale buboes that mark them as victims of the Black Death. The baker's wife is still breathing, barely, her fevered moans echoing off the stone walls as you realize with growing horror that you've just volunteered to tend the dying. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button if you're ready to survive one of history's deadliest pandemics. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing this community grow across the globe. Your hands shake as you tie the leather strip around your mouth, a pathetic barrier against death itself. The cloth smells of vinegar and herbs, rosemary, thyme, anything the local wise woman claimed might ward off the pestilence. But you know the truth that's whispered in the streets. Nothing stops this disease. It moves through London like wildfire through dry wheat, claiming rich and poor alike. The Archbishop is dead. The King's daughter is dead. Half the monks at Westminster Abbey are dead. And you're about to walk directly into its path. The woman on the floor reaches toward you with a trembling hand, her fingers already showing the dark spots that herald the final stage. In her delirium, she mistakes you for her daughter, dead 3 days now and buried in the mass graves outside the city walls. "Mary," she whispers, her voice like grinding stone. "The bread. Finish the bread." You kneel beside her, fighting every instinct screaming at you to run. The rushes on the floor are soaked with bodily fluids you don't want to identify. Rats scatter from the corners, fat, bold rats that have grown sleek, feeding on the endless supply of corpses. These same rats you don't yet know are carrying the very fleas that spread this plague. Medieval people blame everything else: God's wrath, poisoned wells, the alignment of planets. Jewish conspirators. They have no idea that salvation might come from something as simple as killing every rat in sight. The baker's wife convulses, her back arching impossibly as the fever spikes. You've seen this before, the final dance of the plague. Her lymph nodes, swollen to the size of chicken eggs, have turned black and begun to rupture. The smell is indescribable. Medieval physicians call these buboes God's tokens, believing they're marks of divine judgment. They're partially right about the divine part. This disease will reshape Europe more thoroughly than any army ever could. You dip a rag in the bucket of water you've brought, but even this simple comfort feels inadequate. The woman's lips are cracked and bleeding, her tongue swollen. She hasn't been able to keep down food for days. Around her neck hangs a small leather pouch, a pilgrim's badge from Canterbury, where she traveled last spring seeking St. Thomas Becket's blessing. The irony is sharp. Her pilgrimage, meant to secure divine protection, likely exposed her to the very disease now killing her. Through the single window you can hear the death carts making their rounds. "Bring out your dead," the collectors cry, though their voices are muffled by the leather masks they wear. Strange, beak-like contraptions stuffed with aromatic herbs. These plague doctors look like creatures from a nightmare, but they're the only medical professionals still working. Most physicians fled the city months ago, leaving the dying to tend each other. The woman's breathing becomes more labored. Between her gasps, you catch fragments of her confession, sins she's desperate to purge before meeting her maker. She speaks of harsh words to her husband, of bread sold with sawdust mixed in during the lean times, of coins taken from the church poor box when her own children were starving. These aren't the sins of a monster, but of a human being trying to survive in a world that showed no mercy. As her voice fades, you realize something that would astonish modern people. This woman, dying in agony, considers herself lucky. She's dying in her own home, tended by someone who cares enough to stay. Most plague victims die alone in the streets, their bodies collected like refuse. Some are still breathing when the death carts take them. The collectors have learned not to look too closely. Time is precious when 10,000 people are dying every day. The church bells have stopped ringing for the dead. There are too many. Instead, you hear only the constant rumble of cartwheels on cobblestones and the occasional crash of furniture being thrown from windows. Entire households dying so quickly that neighbors loot them before the bodies are cold. The social fabric of medieval England is unraveling in real time, and you're witnessing the birth of a new world built on the ashes of the old. You pull a rough woolen blanket over the baker's wife as her breathing finally stops. Her face in death looks almost peaceful, but there's no time for mourning. Already you can hear scratching in the walls, more rats, drawn by the scent of death. The house needs to be sealed and burned. But first you have other calls to make. The tanner's family 3 streets over, the merchant's children near the river, the priest's elderly mother who refused to evacuate with the rest of the clergy. Stepping into the narrow street, you're struck by how quiet London has become. The usual chaos of merchants hawking their wares, children playing in the mud, animals being driven to market. All of it silenced by death. The cobblestones are slick with an oily residue that you try not to think about too carefully. Windows are boarded shut with rough planks. Red crosses painted hastily on doors to mark the infected houses. But there are so many crosses now that the entire city looks like a massive graveyard. A movement catches your eye. A small figure huddled in a doorway. It's a child, maybe 7 years old, sitting next to what you realize is his mother's corpse. The boy isn't crying anymore. His tears dried up days ago. Instead, he's methodically eating a moldy crust of bread, his hollow eyes staring at nothing. Children like this are everywhere now. Orphaned by the plague, left to fend for themselves in a city where the living barely have enough energy to bury the dead. You approach slowly, your footsteps echoing off the empty buildings. The boy looks up at you with the wary expression of a wild animal. He's learned that adults are dangerous now. Not from malice, but from desperation. People have been known to kill for a scrap of bread, to steal clothes from the dying, to abandon their own children when the plague symptoms appear. Trust is a luxury no one can afford. What's your name? You ask, crouching down to his level. The boy doesn't answer, but he doesn't run either. His clothes are too big for his shrinking frame, probably taken from a dead sibling or parent. The fabric is stained with substances you don't want to identify. His hair is matted with grease and dirt. There's no one left to wash him. No one left to care about such mundane things as cleanliness. When survival is measured in hours, not days, you reach into your leather satchel and pull out a small piece of dried meat. Precious food in a city where the markets have been closed for weeks. The boy's eyes widen, but he doesn't grab for it. He's learned caution the hard way. Too many adults have used food as bait, only to rob children of whatever possessions they might have, or worse, to take them to the plague houses where they'll be put to work tending the dying until they too succumb to the disease. It's yours, you say, placing the meat on the ground between you. No strings attached. The boy waits until you've backed away before snatching the food and devouring it with desperate hunger. As he eats, you notice the telltale swellings beginning to form along his neck. He has maybe 3 days left to live. In 3 days, he'll become another small body for the death carts. Another statistic in a pandemic that's already claimed 1/3 of Europe's population. But you can't save him. That's the brutal arithmetic of the Black Death. For every person you help, 10 more will die. The mathematics of survival are simple and heartless. You have limited supplies, limited energy, limited time before you too succumb to the disease. Every moment spent comforting one victim is a moment not spent helping another. It's a calculus that would break the minds of people living in comfortable modern times, but medieval people understand it instinctively. Moving on from the boy feels like betrayal, but staying would mean abandoning others who might have better chances of survival. This is what the plague does. It forces impossible choices on ordinary people, turns basic human compassion into a strategic decision. You've seen grown men weep as they barricade their own children behind locked doors, choosing to save their healthy offspring by abandoning their sick one. You've watched mothers throw their plague-infected babies into the Thames rather than watch them suffer. These aren't acts of cruelty. They're acts of desperate pragmatism in a world where sentiment equals death. The tanner's shop looms ahead, its wooden sign creaking in the wind. The smell that greets you is different from the bakery. Leather and chemicals mix with the now familiar odor of decomposing flesh. Tanners work with dead animals for a living, so they're intimately familiar with decay. Some people thought this might protect them from the plague, that constant exposure to death would build some kind of immunity. They were wrong. The tanner died 3 days ago. His wife 2 days after that. Only their teenage daughter remains, and she's burning with fever. You push open the door, which swings on its hinges with a prolonged creak that sounds like a death rattle. The girl Margaret, you remember her name from better times, is lying on a pile of raw hides that her father was preparing when he fell ill. The leather is stained with blood and other fluids that have leaked from the dying. She opens her eyes when she hears your footsteps, but the fever has advanced too far for her to focus properly. "Father," she whispers, her voice barely audible, "is the batch ready?" The batch she's referring to is a collection of cowhides that were supposed to be turned into leather jerkins for the city guard. The guards are all dead now, killed not by sword or arrow but by an enemy they couldn't see or fight. Their bodies were among the first to be thrown into the mass graves outside the city walls, still wearing their mail and carrying weapons that proved useless against microscopic death. You kneel beside Margaret and feel her forehead. The heat radiating from her skin is intense, like standing too close to a blacksmith's forge. Her body is fighting a battle it cannot win, burning through whatever reserves of strength a lifetime of hard work has built up. The booze under her arms have grown to the size of apples, black and weeping, a foul-smelling pus that stains everything it touches. In the corner of the workshop you notice something that stops you cold. A small leather doll carefully crafted with the skill that made this family's reputation. It's obviously Margaret's childhood toy, kept safe through years of adult responsibility. Now, it sits abandoned, a reminder of innocence in a world where childhood has become just another casualty of the plague. Children who survive this pandemic won't be children for long. They'll be miniature adults, hardened by experiences that would traumatize grown men in peacetime. Margaret's breathing becomes shallow and irregular. You've learned to recognize the signs. She has perhaps an hour left. In that hour she'll experience more pain than most people endure in a lifetime. Her internal organs are shutting down one by one, her blood turning to poison in her veins. Medieval medicine offers nothing for this kind of suffering except prayer and perhaps a final sip of wine if any can be found. You begin to sing a simple hymn that Margaret would have learned as a child, when the world still made sense and God seemed benevolent. Your voice cracks with exhaustion and grief, but you continue because it's the only gift you can offer. Music costs nothing, and requires no medical knowledge, yet it provides the one thing medieval medicine cannot: human connection in the face of absolute isolation. As you sing, Margaret's features relax slightly. For a moment the pain seems to recede and she's just a young woman listening to a familiar melody. Her lips move slightly, trying to join in with words she's known since childhood, but the effort is too much, and she falls back into the fever dreams that have consumed her for days. The hymn ends, and silence fills the workshop except for the sound of rats moving behind the walls. These creatures have multiplied exponentially during the plague, growing fat on an endless supply of human corpses. They've lost their fear of people, brazenly running across floors even when humans are present. Some people have started worshipping them, believing they're messengers of death sent to guide souls to the afterlife. It's not entirely wrong. The rats are indeed messengers of death, though not in the way these desperate people imagine. Margaret takes one final rattling breath, and then lies still. You close her eyes and arrange her hands across her chest in the traditional pose of Christian burial, though you know she'll never receive proper last rites. The priests are mostly dead, and those few who remain too busy administering mass absolutions to worry about individual ceremonies. Margaret will be thrown into a pit with hundreds of other bodies, Quicklime poured over them to speed decomposition and reduce the smell. But before you leave, you notice something that makes you pause. Scattered around the workshop are dozens of small leather items, coin purses, belt pouches, decorative straps. Each one represents hours of careful work, the accumulated skill of generations passed down from father to son, mother to daughter. This knowledge is dying with the people who possess it. When the plague finally burns itself out, Europe will have to rebuild not just its population but its entire repository of human knowledge and skill. You gather what supplies you can carry and step back into the street. The sun is beginning to set, casting long shadows between the buildings. In normal times, this would be when the taverns came alive with conversation and laughter, when families gathered around their hearths to share the day's experiences. Now the only sounds are the distant rumble of death carts and the occasional cry of someone discovering another body. Your next stop is the merchant's house near the river, but the journey requires passing through what was once London's busiest market square. The space is empty now except for scattered debris and abandoned stalls. A few wooden structures still stand, but they're marked with the red crosses that indicate plague houses. Some of the crosses are painted in blood, actual human blood, used when red paint became too precious to waste on such markings. In the center of the square stands a pile of belongings that reaches nearly as high as a person's head. Clothes, household items, tools, weapons, anything that belonged to plague victims and was considered too dangerous to keep. The authorities ordered these mass burnings early in the pandemic, believing that destroying infected possessions would slow the disease's spread. They weren't entirely wrong, though they didn't understand that the real danger came from the fleas living in fabric, not from some mystical contamination. As you walk past this monument to lost lives, a figure emerges from behind one of the abandoned stalls. It's a man, but barely recognizable as human. His clothes hang in tatters, his hair and beard are wild and unkempt, and his eyes have the hollow look of someone who's seen too much death to remain sane. He carries a wooden staff topped with a cow's skull, one of the self-proclaimed prophets who've appeared throughout the city, preaching that the plague is God's final judgment. The end times are here, he shouts, though his voice is hoarse from constant preaching. Repent before the final darkness falls. He points his staff at you with a trembling hand. You there, still walking among the dead, why do you persist in this cursed existence? The question hits harder than you expected. Why do you persist? Everyone you've ever cared about is likely dead or dying. The world you knew has ended, replaced by something that resembles hell more than earth. Yet something drives you forward, some stubborn refusal to surrender to despair. Perhaps it's simple animal instinct, the biological imperative to survive regardless of circumstances. Perhaps it's something more profound, a belief that bearing witness to this suffering gives it meaning, that refusing to abandon the dying preserves some essential aspect of human dignity. You don't answer the prophet, because there are no words for what you're feeling. Instead, you continue walking, leaving him to rage at the empty square. His voice follows you for several blocks before finally fading into the general cacophony of a city dying in real time. The merchant's house sits on a slight rise overlooking the Thames, which flows dark and sluggish in the evening light. The river carries more than water now. Bodies bob along with the current, too numerous for the death crews to collect. Some are weighted down with stones and disappear beneath the surface, only to resurface days later, bloated and unrecognizable. The Thames has become London's largest graveyard, a flowing tomb that carries the city's dead toward the sea. The house itself is larger than the previous buildings you've visited, 3 stories of stone and timber that speak to the wealth its owner once possessed. But wealth offers no protection against the plague. If anything, wealthy merchants were among the first to die because their business required constant contact with travelers from infected areas. Trade routes that once brought prosperity became highways of death, spreading the plague faster than any army could march. You push open the heavy wooden door, which swings inward with surprising ease. The merchant's family is scattered throughout the ground floor like dolls discarded by a careless child. The father sits slumped in his counting chair, his ledger books still open to pages recording transactions that will never be completed. His wife lies near the fireplace, one arm stretched toward the cold ashes as if she died trying to light a fire for warmth that never came. 2 children, boys, maybe 8 and 10 years old, lie curled together on a pile of expensive furs, their small arms wrapped around each other in a final embrace. But there's movement from upstairs, the sound of someone weep. You climb the narrow wooden stairs, each step creaking under your weight. The sound grows louder as you ascend, mixed now with the delirious muttering that marks advanced fever. On the 2nd floor you find her, the merchant's eldest daughter, probably 16 or 17, lying in what was obviously her parents' bedroom. She's wearing a fine silk gown that would have cost more than most people earned in a year. But the fabric is soaked with sweat and stained with the bodily fluids that accompany the plague's final stages. She looks up as you enter, and for a moment her eyes clear. "Are you an angel?" she asks, her voice weak but still carrying the refined accent of the wealthy. "Mother said angels would come when it was time." The question breaks something inside you that you didn't know was still intact. This girl, Elizabeth, you remember meeting her at the summer markets when the world was still normal, has been alone with her dead family for days, delirious with fever, believing that death would bring divine rescue. The cruel irony is that she's right in a way. Death will rescue her from pain, from the horror of watching everyone she loves rot away, from the impossible task of surviving in a world that no longer has room for the civilized life she was raised to expect. Yes, you lie because kindness matters more than truth when someone is dying. "I'm here to help." Elizabeth smiles, the first genuine expression of happiness you've seen in weeks. "I knew you'd come. I've been so afraid. But I knew someone would come." She reaches out with a trembling hand, and you take it, feeling the fever burning through her skin. Her palm is soft, unmarked by manual labor, the hand of someone who was destined for a comfortable life that the plague has stolen away. "My family," she whispers. "Are they?" Another choice. Tell her the truth, and add psychological agony to her physical pain, or maintain the fiction that might give her some peace in her final hours. "They're safe," you say. "They're waiting for you." Elizabeth nods, apparently satisfied. "I dreamed about that. We were all together in a garden, and no one was sick anymore. The sun was warm, and we were laughing." Her voice trails off as another wave of fever hits, sending her into convulsions that shake the expensive bed frame. You hold her hand through the seizure, feeling utterly helpless. This girl was born into privilege, raised to believe that money and social position could shield her from life's worst hardships. She probably never went hungry, never slept cold, never doubted that her future would unfold according to plan. Now she's dying in agony, abandoned by the very social systems that were supposed to protect her, discovering that the plague recognizes no class distinctions. When the convulsions pass, Elizabeth opens her eyes again. "Tell me about the garden," she says. "Tell me what it looks like." So you describe a place that exists only in imagination. Rolling green hills dotted with fruit trees, a crystal stream running through meadows filled with flowers, warm sunlight that never burns, cool shade that never chills. You tell her about her family waiting there, healthy and happy, eager to welcome her home. With each word you watch some of the tension leave her face, some of the pain ease from her feature. It's a beautiful lie, and you tell it with all the conviction you can muster, because it's the last gift you can give her. The truth, that death is probably just darkness, that her family's corpses are rotting downstairs, that the world she knew is gone forever, serves no purpose except to add cruelty to an already unbearable situation. Sometimes mercy requires deception, and mercy is the only weapon you have against the plague's absolute brutality. Elizabeth dies peacefully, her hand still in yours, a slight smile on her lips as she slips away into whatever comes next. You close her eyes and arrange her body with the same care you've shown the others, though you know she'll receive no more dignified burial than the beggar who died in the street. Death is the great equalizer, and the plague is its perfect instrument. As you prepare to leave the merchant's house, you notice something that stops you cold. On a table near the window sits a chess set, an expensive one with pieces carved from ivory and ebony. The game is half finished, obviously interrupted when the players began showing symptoms. You can see the strategy developing. White was about to checkmate black in 3 moves. It's such a normal human thing, this interrupted game, that it hits you harder than all the corpses combined. Someone was having fun when the world ended. Someone was engaged in the purely human pleasure of intellectual competition, focused on nothing more serious than capturing a carved wooden king. When death walked through their door and ended not just the game but the entire concept of leisure, of life as anything more than desperate survival, you leave the chess set as it is, a monument to normalcy in a world gone mad. Outside, full darkness has fallen, and the city takes on an even more sinister character. Shadows move between buildings, but you can't tell if they're survivors scavenging for supplies or just tricks of exhausted eyes. The moon is full, casting everything in silver light that makes the empty streets look like a graveyard covered in snow. Your final visit of the day is to the priest's elderly mother, who lives in a small cottage behind St. Dunstan's Church. The church itself is locked and barred. The last priest died 2 weeks ago, and no one has come to replace him. His body still lies somewhere inside, probably adding its stench to the general miasma of decay that hangs over the city like a fog that never lifts. The cottage is dark, but you can see a faint glow through the shuttered windows, candlelight, which means someone is still alive inside. You knock gently, not wanting to startle whoever remains. After a long moment you hear shuffling footsteps and a querulous voice asking, "Who's there?" "A friend," you answer, which is both true and inadequate. "I've come to help." The door opens slowly, revealing an ancient woman, who might be 80 years old, an incredible age in medieval times, especially now when most people die young from the plague. She peers at you with eyes clouded by cataracts, her back bent by decades of hard work. Her name is Agnes, you remember, and she was already old when you were young. "Come in," she says, her voice steady despite her age. "I've been expecting someone." The cottage interior is tiny but clean, perhaps the cleanest place you've seen in months. Agnes moves with the careful precision of someone whose body betrays her but whose mind remains sharp. A small fire burns in the grate, and a pot of something that might be soup simmers over the flame. The air smells of herbs and old wood, a pleasant contrast to the stench of decay that permeates most of the city. "You're not sick," you observe, and it's both a question and a statement of wonder. Agnes chuckles, a dry sound like autumn leaves rustling. "I'm too old to die young," she said. "Been exposed to every disease this city has seen over the past 8 decades. Maybe that's protection. Maybe it's just God's sense of humor. Either way, I'm still here." She's right, though she doesn't know the scientific reason. Agnes has lived through multiple plague outbreaks, smallpox epidemics, and countless other diseases that swept through medieval London. Her immune system, battered and scarred by decades of exposure, has developed a breadth of resistance that younger people lack. She's a walking testament to the principle that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, literally in this case. "Sit," she commands, gesturing to a 3-legged stool near the fire. "You look like death yourself." The irony of her words isn't lost on you. You do look like death, clothes stained with the fluids of the dying, skin pale from exhaustion and poor nutrition, eyes hollow from witnessing horrors that have no names. But Agnes seems untroubled by your appearance, perhaps because she's seen enough death in her long life to be immune to its visual impact. She ladles soup into a wooden bowl and hands it to you. The liquid is thin but warm, flavored with herbs you can't identify. It's the first hot meal you've had in weeks, and the simple pleasure of it brings tears to your eyes. Agnes pretends not to notice your emotional response, busying herself with tending the fire while you eat. "My son is dead," she says matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. "Father Benedict, good boy always was. Thought God would protect him because he was doing holy work. Learned different, didn't he?" The casual way she discusses her son's death is shocking until you realize it's a survival mechanism. Agnes has outlived her husband, most of her friends, and now her child. Grief is a luxury that could break her mind if she indulged in it fully. Instead, she's compartmentalized the loss, filed it away with all the other losses that accumulate over a lifetime of surviving in a brutal world. "Tell me," she says, settling into a chair that creaks under even her slight weight. "What's it like out there? I haven't left this cottage in weeks." So you tell her. You describe the empty streets, the death carts, the abandoned children, the mass graves growing outside the city walls. You tell her about the families you've watched die, the individuals you've comforted in their final moments, the complete breakdown of everything that once made London a functioning city. Agnes listens without interruption, nodding occasionally as if your report confirms things she already suspected. "How many do you think are left?" she asks when you finish. It's a question you've been avoiding thinking about too carefully. "Maybe 1 in 5, you answer honestly. "Maybe fewer in the city center." Agnes nods. "That's what I figured. This plague, it's not like the others. This one has teeth." She stares into the fire for a long moment, her ancient face reflecting decades of accumulated wisdom and pain. "I've seen famines that killed thousands, wars that burned half the countryside, diseases that swept through like summer storms. But this is different. This is the end of something." Her words carry a weight that goes beyond individual death count. The Black Death isn't just killing people, it's killing the entire medieval world system. The feudal structures that govern society are collapsing as lords and peasants die equally. The Catholic Church's authority is crumbling as prayers prove useless, and priests die alongside their congregations. Trade networks that took centuries to build are severing as merchant families disappear overnight. "What comes after?" you ask, voicing the question that haunts every survivor. Agnes shrugs, a gesture that somehow conveys both resignation and hope. "Something new always does. People forget that Rome fell once, and everyone thought the world was ending then too. But something new grew up in its place. Won't be the same as what we lost, but it'll be something." Her perspective, shaped by 8 decades of witnessing change, offers a strange comfort. She's seen empires rise and fall, technologies appear and disappear, social systems transform themselves beyond recognition. To her, the Black Death is catastrophic but not unprecedented. Just another turning point in the endless cycle of destruction and renewal that defines human history. "The young ones who survive," she continues, "they'll build something we can't even comprehend. They'll have to. The old ways are dying with the old people. By the time this plague burns itself out, there won't be enough left of our world to rebuild it exactly as it was." She's prophetically correct, though she can't know the specifics. The survivors of the Black Death will indeed build something new. A world where labor is scarce enough to command higher wages, where social mobility becomes possible for the first time in centuries, where questioning traditional authority becomes acceptable because traditional authority failed so completely during the crisis. The Renaissance, the Reformation, the gradual emergence of individual rights, all of these developments will flow partly from the social upheaval caused by this pandemic. But that's future history. Right now, Sitting in Agnes's cottage with a bowl of warm soup in your hands, the future seems impossibly distant. Right now, there's only the immediate challenge of surviving another day, another night, another round of visits to the dying who have no one else to comfort them. Agnes seems to read your thoughts. You'll keep going, she says with quiet certainty. You're the type, I can tell. You'll keep going until your body gives out, or the plague takes you. Whichever comes first. Can't help yourself. She's right, and you both know it. Some people are built to run when disaster strikes, others to hide and wait for safety, still others to fight until they're overwhelmed. But a few, a very few, are compelled to stay and help, even when helping seems futile, even when every rational calculation suggests that survival requires abandoning others to their fate. Why, you ask? As much to yourself as to her. Agnes smiles, the first genuine warmth you've seen on any face in weeks. Because somebody has to. Because if everyone runs, if everyone looks out only for themselves, then we stop being human. We become just another kind of animal, fighting over scraps until there's nothing left to fight for. Her words echo something you've been thinking but couldn't articulate. The plague threatens more than individual lives. It threatens the social bonds that make civilization possible. Every act of kindness, every moment of selfless care, every decision to help rather than abandon becomes a small victory against the forces of dissolution. You're not just tending the dying. You're preserving the idea that human beings have responsibilities to each other that transcend personal survival. The fire burns low as the night deepens. Agnes prepares for sleep with the methodical movements of someone who's performed the same routine for decades. She offers you a place to rest, a pile of blankets in the corner. But you decline. There are others who need checking on, and dawn will bring new crises that require attention. Will you come back? She asks, as you prepare to leave. If I can, you answer honestly. If I'm still alive. Agnes nods, understanding the qualification. In plague time, promises extend only as far as the next sunrise. If you don't come back, I'll understand. But if you do, she pauses, as if weighing her words carefully. If you do, I'll have more soup ready. It's a small thing, the promise of soup, but it represents something larger, the possibility of continuity, of human connection persisting despite impossible circumstances. As you step back into the nightmare landscape of plague-ravaged London, Agnes's cottage remains a small beacon of normalcy in your mind, proof that civilization hasn't entirely collapsed. As long as someone still tends a fire and offers food to strangers. The streets are quieter now, if such a thing is possible. Even the death carts have stopped their rounds. The collectors need rest too, and the dead will wait until morning. But the silence isn't peaceful. It's the silence of a city holding its breath, waiting for the sun to reveal how much more has been lost during the night. Your footsteps echo between empty buildings as you make your way home, or what passes for home now. A small room above what used to be a cloth merchant's shop. The merchant and his family died weeks ago, and you've been squatting in their space ever since, along with 3 other survivors who've banded together for mutual protection and comfort. But as you approach the building, you notice something wrong. The door, which should be barred from the inside, hangs open. No light shows through the windows. The silence has a different quality, not the temporary quiet of sleep, but the permanent stillness of abandonment or death. You climb the narrow stairs to your shared room, knowing what you'll find but hoping against hope that you're wrong. But hope is another luxury that plague time rarely allows. Sarah lies on her pallet, the fever having claimed her sometime during your absence. Thomas sits slumped against the wall, his face already showing the black spots that mark the plague's final victory. Young William, barely 16 when this all started, breathes in the shallow, irregular pattern. That means he has perhaps hours left. Thomas looks up as you enter, his eyes focusing with effort. Wondered if you'd make it back, he says, his voice barely a whisper. Thought maybe you'd found somewhere better to die. Not yet, you answer, settling down beside him. How long has Sarah been gone? Few hours. Went peaceful though. Just closed her eyes and stopped breathing. He coughs, bringing up blood that stains his lips black. William's next, then me, then you. Probably. The matter-of-fact way he discusses their deaths would have seemed callous a year ago. Now it's just realistic assessment of unchangeable facts. The plague has stripped away the comfortable illusions that make normal life bearable, leaving only naked truth about mortality and the randomness of survival. William stirs at the sound of voices, opening eyes that burn with fever. Did you find any food? He asks, though you both know he's beyond eating now. The question is reflexive, born from weeks of constant hunger and the deep human need to focus on practical concerns even when facing death. You pull out the last piece of dried meat from your satchel, saved for emergencies. Though every moment now qualifies as an emergency, William takes it with trembling hands but can only manage a few small bites before the effort becomes too much. He passes the meat back to you with a weak smile that breaks your heart. Save it, he whispers, for tomorrow.